Good evening, everybody, and let's get the week underway. Democrats tonight threatening to shut down the government rather than approve funding for President Trump's border wall in a government spending bill. Lawmakers have until Friday night to pass funding legislation that would keep the government open. Attorney General Jeff Sessions today made his case for the wall, saying that if Democrats block the funds, voters should blame the Dems for the resulting government shutdown.
The way the system works is that whenever the government is shut down, people blame the Republicans. But let me tell you, it will be the Democrats that shut this government down to block the funding of the wall.
And on Fox News Sunday, Budget Director Mick Mulvaney called on Democrats to compromise.
We are asking for our priorities. And importantly, we are offering to give Democrats some of their priorities as well. They've made it very clear they want these cost-sharing reduction payments as part of Obamacare. We don't like those very much, but we have offered to open the discussions to give the Democrats something they want in order to get something we want.
Okay. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? But Democrats refuse to fund the wall and have now made it clear they prefer to leave the border with Mexico wide open. No matter how many deadly drugs are smuggled across that border, no matter how many Americans are killed. Here to discuss the president's request for $1.5 billion to fund the wall, the threats from Democratic leaders to shut down the government if the wall is part of the spending bill, Congressman Louis Gohmert, a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Good to have you with us, Congressman. Let's start, if we may, with this very charitable, generous, warm embrace on the part of the OMB director, Mick Mulvaney, of all things Democratic in the way of, well, whatever they want to trade for. That's a nice approach. It doesn't seem to be anything anything we're used to, at least, over the past administration.
Well, we weren't used to it with the past administration, but 2 administrations ago, the Bush administration would have Kennedy to the White House about as often as anybody, or more so, and he would enjoy anything that Bush would be hospitable and provide, and then walk right out to the microphones and call Bush everything in the books. A lot of Democrats do that. So I don't expect to see anything different than what people did, Democrats did
Congressman,
back then.
I know you well. You're not a cynical person. You're a man of a big heart, big mind. We've got big things to get done in this country.
We do.
Surely
we
the
absolutely
Democrats
do.
and the Republicans can come together on this. What do you think? $1.5 billion for a little, let's call it a barrier. Let's call it some sort of obstacle. If not a wall. Can't that be finessed a little?
Yeah, we can finesse that. And in fact, Obama would take money that was geared for one thing and use it for something else. I don't advocate doing that. But there is so much money in the budget that can be used. We just got to make sure he has what he needs. But keep in mind, he said that we would build the wall and Mexico would pay for it. And some people say, well, then why does he need money? He didn't say when. It's kind of like the Bible. God says, if you ask for wisdom, I'll give it. But he never said when. I've been asking since I was 6 years old. Some things, just take time and don't occur real quick. But I think that's the way with the wall. We're going to build it, and I can guarantee you Trump's going to keep his word. Mexico's going to end up paying. I've heard some good ideas for how that's going to be made to happen. Yeah. So I think it will happen. But listen, there are 10 Democrats in the Senate that are straining because they're pulled one direction by Schumer, but they're pulled another by wanting to keep their seat in a state that Trump won.
We know how that pull will work out.
Yeah, well.
So let me ask you this: when we're talking about the physics of being a congressman, the House is controlled by the Republican Party, so I hear.
Is it?
The Senate is controlled by the Republicans, which I also. I now take, by the way, I happen to believe it now that Neil Gorsuch has been confirmed.
Yeah, that's true.
So controlling both of those august bodies, why in the world should we have to worry about the government being shut down? Why don't you all just pass some legislation and get it moving straight away?
Well, I'm hoping that's what we're going to do. I do think it's nice to reach out to offer an olive branch. I don't think that Obama had the right approach. He and Henry Waxman saying...
Whoa. Congressman, you and I mean, I've got I get a kick out of you.
I think the world of you.
And same back at you. But when you start going back to Henry Waxman and Obama, you've got to
but I'm saying their
that
approach,
go, Congressman. You've got to let it go. I know there was a lot of pain.
but it's a contrast. That's the way they did it. We didn't need your votes. We don't want your vote. We don't care what your input is. That isn't the way it should be.
Right.
And I'm grateful that Mick and others are reaching out. Hey, let's come and reason together. That's the way we ought to do it, unless somebody has 100% lock on God's truth all the time. So it's good to have the discussion. It's good to come together. And some are accusing us on Obamacare of not being willing to come together. And I can tell you, though, Lou, we would have a deal already if leadership would not keep running in and saying, no, the moderates and the conservatives, they can't reach an agreement. It's
what is your speaker
us.
doing? Paul Ryan is nosediving in the polls. The American people don't think much of him. That's down from not thinking very much at all. What are you doing with the speaker? The speaker has betrayed this president and defied his agenda and the American voters who put this president in the White House. I mean, he is acting irrationally here, Congressman Gomer.
Well, he thinks apparently that this bill was the Obamacare so-called repeal was a good bill, but the trouble is, it's not. I mean, it's not near as good as the one we did 2 years ago. We got everybody to vote on that, so I didn't know why we couldn't go back there.
You're going to legislate that, so I don't want to litigate it tonight. But I do want to understand what you're going to do with a speaker who defies the president, asserts his personal agenda over that of the president of the United States, makes the conference, the Republican conference, look like you folks have lost your minds to put up with him and actually call him some sort of leader. I mean, the American people are telling you in poll after poll, there it is. He is viewed negatively. I mean, he has been nosediving in the polls because the American people are not as dumb as he obviously thinks they are. They know what he's doing.
I'm hoping that we're going to be able to be allowed to come to an agreement on Obamacare. It's not going to be a repeal, but we have got to bring down premiums. And
it's not going to be a repeal. Wait a minute.
We wanted to get in the same room with the moderates and work this out.
The president campaigned on repealing it. You got regular order, and people can't amend bills. They can't even vote on them.
And they come up with whoever. It wasn't Trump's idea to have 3 buckets. He was told this is the best way to get it through Congress.
Now, folks who don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about 3 buckets, suddenly there were 3 phases to come into a sensible conclusion on Obamacare, which is exploding right in front of our eyes.
All we had to do was do what we did 2 years ago and then let free markets work. We did do a good thing in the House when we voted to end the exemption of health insurance companies from antitrust laws. And I'm not being sarcastic.
No, I know you're not.
If we didn't do that, then you buy across state lines, you have 1 monopoly instead of 50.
But we've got such fine, well, kind of small pickings to go from when we start talking about the good things that have been done with Obamacare. But congratulations on that one, Congressman, and I know there will be many more.
I think we're going to get a deal done, and we are going to get a deal done on taxes. We have got to bring those down.
I hear you. We
got to do it.
I hear you.
I think we will.
But I'm not going to, and I appreciate it.
I think we will.
But I'm just not going to get excited quite yet.
Congressman, I look forward to you getting excited, Lou, because it's going to happen.
You got it, Congressman. Great to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Lou.
We're coming right back with much more. Stay with us. Trump has criticized the first 100 days as ridiculous, but he's certainly accomplished more than his predecessors in that time period. Before Saturday's deadline, the president is planning to sign at least 4 more executive orders, including one on easing oil and gas regulations, another that would protect whistleblowers at the Department of Veterans Affairs. President Trump has already signed 25 executive orders compared to 19 for President Obama, 11 for George W. Bush, 12 for Bill Clinton. And President Trump has signed 28 laws compared to 14 for Obama, 7 for Bush, and 22 for Clinton. That just about stacks it up for us on the 100-day thing. and this is only day 95. The president's set to release his tax plan Wednesday. We don't know just how much detail will be in it, but we'll find out when Treasury Secretary Mnuchin says the administration is focusing on 3 major priorities.
Middle income tax cut, a priority of the president's. Simplification. The average American should be able to do their taxes on a large postcard. Business tax reform. We need to make business taxes competitive, and we expect with doing that we will bring back trillions of dollars from offshore.
Sounds like a plan, but apparently not quite good enough yet. Joining me now to discuss the busy week ahead for this president and the Congress, senior editor at The Federalist, Molly Hemingway, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the New York Post, Michael Goodwin. Thank you both for being here. Molly, I can only imagine your excitement at learning more about the tax reform plan.
Actually, I really am excited about learning more about the tax reform plan. It's been 30 years since we've had any major revision in corporate tax rates. Obviously, it's a big reason why our economy has been sluggish, as it was for the entirety of Obama's 8-year term. And it's a big part of the Trump agenda to get the economy moving, get growth above 3%. And so it'll be interesting to see. I'm actually surprised, though, that he's including in this a middle-class tax cut, which could be a big deficit buster. And well, there should be broad bipartisan consensus on reforming corporate tax rates. I think you'll see a lot of resistance from Democrats on improving the situation for middle-class Americans. Maybe it's an opening bid. It will be very expensive.
I think the middle class, if I may say, Michael, I think the middle class ought to go absolutely ballistic if there's not a tax cut for the middle class. It's been shrinking. This president, in part, won the presidency in focusing on the middle class, those jobs, and their wages, which have been stagnant for 30 years.
Yeah, I think that has to be part of it. Although, you know, with incomes falling, I mean, I think that is the biggest problem. So people are going to be looking for some relief from the government. And I think it's also it has to be part of a package in order to get buy-in for the tax, for the corporate tax, which of course the Democrats will resist. So look, I think it's going to be a long slog, and they're doing it Wednesday, but I don't think they're going to give us much more than he has said here.
Yeah, I think Molly probably may have outlined it every bit as well as the Treasury Secretary might aspire to do. Molly, this is a difficult time because the 2001-2003 tax cuts did not result in job creation. This president's talking about what he said arguably, I believe, is the impression we can derive from what he said, that it could be the largest tax cut in personal income rates, ever. I just have a hard time understanding how, with a $20 trillion national debt, $500 billion trade deficits, and we know we're going to go above that in budget deficits over the next 5 years. This is a tough time to say, I want my 15% corporate tax cut, which I respect and admire the president for ordering, but it's also going to be very tough in terms of fiscal policy to achieve.
Well, it is very important that people understand, though, that our high corporate tax rates, which are globally, unmatched, they are so high, they're really corrosive to expanding business, to keeping business here in this country. That is, if you reform the tax code as it relates to these big corporations that are easily finding it that they can just pick up and go elsewhere, that does help middle-class voters. That helps all voters and all people who are beneficiaries of a thriving economy. Our economy has been so sluggish. There needs to be change here. But it is true that I don't think people care that much about deficits, at least as much as I do. But a middle-class tax cut will be explosive to the deficit in a way that corporate tax changes might not be.
Michael is nodding his head in animated agreement. I'm reserving mine.
Well, look, I think that the elephant in the room here, of course, is Congress. And the fact that the president is what looks now to be rushing this out to beat the 100 days so he can say he has a plan within the 100 days. I mean, Mnuchin has already said he doesn't think anything will get through Congress this year. So they're not terribly optimistic. But Lou, I think that Trump has a lot to point to, but the failure to repeal Obamacare, and I agree with you on the failure of Paul Ryan's leadership, I think does not bode well for anything that the president's pushing.
If they don't replace this speaker, for want of a better word, they're going to be in real trouble. They've got enough without having to put up with a speaker who has gone rogue and, frankly, is suffering from delusions of grandeur.
He's also MIA. I mean, where has he been?
Well, he's
Europe?
pursuing his foreign policy, don't you know? He's been in Europe straightening things out over there. So that when whatever his aspirations are realized, it'll all be set in place. The man has lost it. There's no question. Molly, I want to just say to you, something that's not discussed in terms of corporate tax rates often enough, in my opinion, is the effective tax rate. And the effective tax rate in this country, as you know, is about 17%. So I think that the administration is running a huge risk here of overselling the impact of a cut, even to 15% in the tax cut, and has to be, I would hope, that they will be very careful here, because they're not going to be able to make much headway for the reasons both that you and Michael have outlined. I mean, I just see all sorts of trouble being created over in the House where they're not ready to line up. What do you think?
Well, a couple of things. One, I actually do think we'll see some news here on health care, and the fact that Paul Ryan has been quiet might be a good sign, given how poorly he handled the first rollout of repealing Obamacare.
Do you think this man really learns anything?
I hope so. And the first rollout was.
We can join in hope. If not, I'm being told we got to wrap up. So go ahead, please.
But President Trump has made it clear that he would like health care taken care of before they deal with the tax rollout, because it is important to get those savings
that $900
so that,
billion, right,
that we can pay forward on these corporate tax rates. And the marginal tax rates are still cartoonishly high for, when you compare it to what's happening in other countries.
Cartoonishly high.
I mean, they're really out of step with what's happening in other countries, and this is not a way to be competitive in a global environment.
Last quick word.
Well, look, she's obviously right about the corporate rates, but I do think that the president is going to have a hard time getting anything through Congress that makes a difference to the middle class, and I think that is going to be the rub. And so I predict disappointment.
He got elected building a wall. He got elected saying America first. He got elected saying that the American worker will no longer be the forgotten man. I don't care about tax reform. I don't care about any other part of that agenda. And as long as he delivers on that, this president will be here for 8 years to get it all done and much more. And he's off to a glorious start. That's the beauty of it all. Molly Hemingway, thank you very much for being with us. Michael Goodwin, thank you. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, if the Dems refuse to fund the wall, would you blame them if the government shuts down as a result? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Or follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. On Wall Street, stocks soaring after the so-called centrist, by the way, in Europe that would be a communist, Emmanuel Macron, pulled in the highest number of votes in the first round of the French presidential election by 2%. The Dow up 216 points on all of that, if you believe the so-called analysts. The S&P up 25, the Nasdaq up 73, closing at a new record high. Volume on the big board, 3.5 billion shares. European stocks surged. The French CAC 40 up more than 4%, ending at a 2-year high. And a reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. Go Salem. Up next, the fight to build the border wall, the subject of my commentary. And Attorney General Sessions calling on state officials to comply with national immigration laws.
There's nothing extreme or unreasonable about that. I urge our mayors and our politicians to listen to their law officers. Let's work together. Let's cooperate between the federal and state authorities. Let's remove dangerous criminals from America.
Hell of an idea, isn't it? Follow the law. What in the world? I had no idea that Jeff Sessions would make such a radical attorney general. Did you? Well, many states are refusing to follow the law. We'll have a full report on that here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. A heated standoff between the nation's top law enforcement official and the Attorney General of the state of California. Attorney General Jeff Sessions accusing Javier Becerra of jeopardizing public safety with his sanctuary city policies. Fox News correspondent William Lajeunesse with our report.
Los Angeles, ground zero in the war over cities that refuse to hand over criminal aliens.
You said years ago you'd see 100 people a night on a Friday from LA County Jail. Now what do you see on a week?
We're 50 to 75 for the entire week.
Before California stopped cooperating with the feds on immigration enforcement, this detention facility processed thousands of criminal aliens from local jails for deportation. Now, according to ICE, most get released to the streets instead.
It's troubling for us because here's an individual, a criminal alien, somebody that we can use our unique authorities to not only remove them from the community, but ultimately remove them from the country. And again, there's law enforcement agencies that are just letting them go.
That's unacceptable to Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
It's nothing extreme about saying if someone comes through our country unlawfully and commits a crime, another crime in the country, that they should be deported.
Sanctuary jurisdictions say immigration is not their problem.
What he said, we fully respect that they have the responsibility to enforce immigration law. So we're in the business of public safety. We're not in the business of deportation.
According to Sessions, they are. When state and local officials accepted federal grant money, they agreed to follow federal law. By failing to cooperate with ICE, they risk losing that money.
State and local governments cannot bar their police and law enforcement officers from sharing information with the federal government.
That sharing occurs when inmates get booked into jail. Fingerprints are transmitted to ICE, which informs police who to hold for deportation, a system the state attorney general rejects.
I will tell you that we can prove anywhere we need to, whether court of public opinion or court of law, that we are protecting our people.
Sessions has given California and 8 sanctuary cities a June deadline to prove they are not in violation of federal law. Lou?
William, thank you. Protecting our people, he said. Odd choice of words, don't you think? Well, a few thoughts now on a country changing. Certainly the United States is no longer a sanctuary nation, certainly not the one the Bush and Obama administrations tried to create. President Trump's executive orders and his policies have been influential in cutting illegal immigration by as much as 70% over the past 2 months. And now the Trump administration is making preliminary funding for the border wall a top budgetary priority. Mr. Trump tweeted this today, saying, quote, "The wall is a very important tool in stopping drugs from pouring into our country and poisoning our youth and many others. If the wall is not built, which it will be, the drug situation will never be fixed the way it should be." Attorney General Jeff Sessions pointing to the economic benefits of a secure border.
It will save us billions of dollars because the numbers of people that are coming will be reduced dramatically. The amount of drugs entering our country will be reduced. The number of people we are housing in detention centers will be declining. We're going to get people out of the country to these countries that aren't taking them back after they're due to be deported. It's going to save us hundreds of millions, billions of dollars.
And look at some of the devastating costs. Each year, Mexican drug cartels rake in $64 billion in profits from the sale of heroin, methamphetamines, and other drugs in this country. Latin American drug cartels now blame for the unprecedented 52,000 plus drug overdose deaths in this country during 2015 alone. Escalating threats now from MS-13 gang members crossing into this country. The Trump administration appears likely to designate MS-13 as a transnational terrorist organization. There are now thousands of the gang members located in 40 states as a result of lax immigration and border enforcement over the past decade. The White House wants $1.5 billion in the new spending bill for the wall. Attorney General Sessions says we could pay for that wall by eliminating $4 billion a year in inappropriate, sometimes fraudulent, refundable tax credits going to illegal immigrants. $4 billion a year. The cost of open borders has reached outrageous proportions, and it would be rising even further if Americans hadn't elected Donald Trump to the presidency, in part to build that wall that he promised. And if the Dems are willing to shut down the government to leave our borders open to the drug cartels to smuggle methamphetamines, marijuana, cocaine, and heroin, to smuggle hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants into the country, to permit terrorists to cross that border unimpeded, then the Dems are doomed to perpetual irrelevance, in my opinion, and everlasting shame for leaving our great nation defenseless. Our quotation of the evening, this one from Attorney General Sessions, who said, quote, "Donald Trump is right. We need to figure out a way to end this cycle of hostility that's putting this country at risk, costing us billions of dollars in defense and creating hostility that should not exist. The wall is a multiplier, in my judgment, of force and the most efficient protection for our country, that barrier along the border with Mexico. It's time to build it." We're coming right back. Joining me now, former ambassador to the United Nations, Fox News contributor, Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador, great to have you with us. Let's put up the map, first of all, of the Carl Vinson attack strike force that is now in the Philippine Sea as a result of the provocations moving the president moving this strike group into position. And as we understand it now, they'll be in position to execute whatever their orders are from President Trump within a matter of days. Your thoughts first on all of the saber rattling, and I know it's a trite way to say that the North Koreans are trying to do something with their nuclear base. What is it?
Yeah, well, I think people have speculated about a sixth nuclear test for quite some time. That could be coming up in the next days. Their ballistic missile testing has been very aggressive for the last year and a half, and all of our top military analysts believe they're very close to being able to put a miniaturized warhead on a missile that can hit the United States. So that concern, I think, is what's at the top of the agenda.
Add to that a briefing tomorrow at the White House, an unusual briefing. All 100 senators asked to be at the briefing at the White House, Wednesday. What are we to make of that?
Well, I think one thing that you could say about the way Trump is approaching this is that he's trying to explain to people how serious this is. And he has a heavy burden here because for 8 years, Obama's strategic patience doctrine meant that he barely talked about the North Korean threat. And I see that threat linked with Iran. I think whatever North Korea has, Iran can buy. So although the immediate challenge is on the Korean Peninsula, it does have broader implications. And let's face it, this regime in North Korea is not rational in our terms. So even if there's not a direct nuclear or ballistic missile threat, they've done things before like landing commandos on the shores of South Korea. They've attacked South Korean naval vessels. They do things that a rational government would not do.
A military option here is practicable and successful, assured of success.
Well, I think if what we were concerned about was a potential missile lifting off to hit the United States, the President of the United States would have no choice but to take it out. But I also think that our readiness capabilities after 8 years of savage budget cuts put a heavy burden on us and the South Koreans. So this is not the ideal time for North Korea to be making a lot of progress, and it's why Trump's approach...
Well, it's not the ideal time for the United States for North Korea.
Right. But that's why the pressure on China is important. My view is that the Chinese need to do more than posture.
Why do we keep talking about what we're doing with another country, putting pressure on them to do this or that? It is, in the real world, it's pretty clear. Pressure doesn't work. Alignment of interest does work. You can incentivize a country like China, but you're not going to put pressure on them. And the idea of sanctions that we're now expanding, it's just in Syria. This is getting preposterous.
Well, I think
economic sanctions do not work. I'm saying that baldly, fully, to anyone's face who wants to continue to talk. And today we're listening to the Treasury Secretary say they're impactful. They're not impactful. They haven't changed the course of history anywhere.
Well, they may or may not have, but in the case of Korea, they certainly have not.
Again, Ambassador. They have not.
No, I think you can say that what they did in the Iraq War, the first Persian Gulf War, was they demonstrated Iraq was never going to withdraw from Kuwait, even though it was the most massive imposition of sanctions.
Economic sanctions
politically
work when they demonstrate that you need a military solution for the political.
That's right. That's where I'm coming from. But back on China, I think the point you made earlier is important.
Well, I'll take that one to discuss.
I just discuss every once in a while, I thought I'd mention it. But China's interest here really does lie very similar to ours in reuniting the peninsula in a sensible fashion that eliminates North Korea and eliminates its nuclear capability. That's being for diplomatic solutions, as I always am. That's what I would shoot for.
All right. And I love the expression shoot for when assigned to a diplomatic solution. Ambassador John Bolton, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Lou.
We appreciate it. Where you are with the lawsuit against the State Department, the $5 million it's supposed to be between USAID and George Soros's Open Society. What in the world is going on there?
Yeah, it's madness.
Let me say the word Macedonia really quickly, just to make it intriguing for everyone.
Intrigue in the Balkans. So, for some strange reason, the State Department decided that George Soros's operation in the Open Society Foundation needed $5 million of our tax money, yours and mine, and many others, to basically use Saul Alinsky tactics to knock out the duly and rightfully elected center-right government in Macedonia. And so they did things like translate Alinsky's rules for radicals into Macedonian, and they're training youth to go out on the street and protest.
Now you're saying USAID is doing this?
USAID is funding an Open Society Foundation arm, a Soros operation.
Which are always political arms.
Correct. In Macedonia, using our tax dollars. And
well, I'm surprised the left isn't all over this, because this would be interference in an election by George Soros and his Open Society. I mean, my goodness, surely they won't stand for that.
Exactly. The hypocrisy and the irony is rich.
Well, what is not rich, but Rice, is Susan Rice and the spy scandal of the Obama administration. He has been quiescent until today, giving his first speech in which he said basically nothing. But Susan Rice, the Obama administration, we're looking at the first closed door hearing from next week for the intelligence committees. Is there any prospect at all that we're going to learn any more about the scope, the scale of what was clearly an abuse of power within the Obama administration?
I'm going to go back to my favorite song, and that is Grand Jury. That's what I want to see, a grand jury. The hearings in Congress are necessary. They're constitutionally obligated. Obviously, their oversight obligation that the House and Senate committees have. But, you know, the behind closed door sessions are one thing. The public sessions are really, they're publicity stunts, both for the congressmen and then also for the people testifying.
Right, we know, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We know that the former NDI, James Clapper, the former CIA director, John Brennan, both lied about the extent of surveillance on the part of the intelligence community.
Among other things.
Among other things. In the case of John Brennan, you know, his agency was surveilling. This is one of the, to me, the richest moments of the Obama administration. Spying on the Senate Intelligence Committee, got away with lying about it, got away with doing it, and here he is going back to talk to his friends on Capitol Hill.
This is all about crafting a narrative, right? This is a public relations campaign. It's a domestic information operation where these guys get in front of this open session and they try to craft the narrative. They try to get all the various talking heads on television and the writers to all agree on what the sort of the mutually agreed upon lie that they're going to try to sell the American public.
Which they've done so well for so long. Chris Farrell, and thanks to you and Judicial Watch, they get away with fewer than they might otherwise. Thank you.
You are correct. Thanks, Lou.
Up next, Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez. He cusses a lot of swearing and not so much unity.
He calls it a skinny budget. I call it something else that begins with S. And my mama taught me you shouldn't do potty talk. But I hope you don't mind, because this is a budget.
awful. Just awful. We'll take up the Dems' embrace of vulgarity. David Horowitz and Nan Hayworth with me next. Oh, so powerful, that profanity, huh? We'll be right back. Our online poll last week, the question was, are you confident that Congress can come together to avoid a government shutdown on April 28? And 55% of you replied joyously, hopefully, no. Joining me now, David Horowitz, conservative commentator, best-selling author, and the New York Times bestseller, this time, Big Agenda. There, I said it. Man, mainstream media is going to be all over me for that. Former Congresswoman for New York, Dr. Nan Hayworth. Good to have you both here.
Great to be with
Nan,
you.
let's start with the DNC's Unity Tour. Tom Perez kicking off with Trump doesn't give an expletive about people, and that he has a expletive, the budget. What do you make of this guy?
Well, Tom Perez proves the poverty of ideas on the Democratic side, the poverty of solutions, which mirrors, of course, how they left us, the powerless state they left our economy, our families, working families, and our nation in. When they resort to name-calling and profanity, he is worth listening to neither in form nor in substance.
The Democrats are giving the Republicans hope, David. I mean, neither unity nor very gracious language.
Well, in my book, Big Agenda, I described...
I'm sorry, what was the title again?
Big Agenda. I described the Democratic Party as a party of hate. They deal in character assassination. Anybody who disagrees with them is a racist, sexist, homophobe, Islamophobe, xenophobe for those Democrats who understand what that means. They're just consumed by their hatred. And it's an extreme party now. Tom Perez is way off the left deep end.
Yeah. And you know what's... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, the Democratic Party, although I was going to say Perez was the candidate opposed to the Sanders candidate, Ellison, who lost by only 13 votes. But the Democratic Party is the party of Bernie Sanders. He would have won the nomination if the crooked Clintons hadn't fixed the primaries.
Most recent poll, 2/3 of Americans see the Democrats as out of touch, if we can put that up, including nearly half of the Dems themselves. I mean, this is extraordinary stuff. I've never seen one that acknowledged what has been so obvious to most of us.
Of course.
And this is amazing. It's got to be a wind at the back of the Republicans who desperately need a little boost here.
Well, and they should capitalize on that. They should break the filibuster on cloture, passing laws in the Senate, because the American people crossed lines. They crossed party lines, as you know, Lou, to vote for President Trump because they want him to change what that party failed to do for us, and indeed did very badly, the damage they did.
The Republicans control this government, the House, the Senate, the White House, David, and now we're talking about the prospect of possibly a shutdown. What in the world are the Republicans thinking?
Well, as you know, Republicans march to the tune of their own drummers. Unlike the Democrats who march in lockstep, like
we got about 20 seconds, David.
Yeah, so the Republicans are obstructionists too for Trump.
Break the filibuster.
David,
Trump is...
I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it there, David. Thanks again.
Right.
I think the title of the book is The Big Agenda. I'm just guessing at that. Nan Hayworth, thanks. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate you both being with us. And join us tomorrow, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, General Jack Keane, Kimberly Guilfoyle. Be with us. Good night from New York.